pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is anyone here for our first public comment? Okay. Review and approval of minutes. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at these? We'll do them one at a time, if you don't mind.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes for January 30th, 2025.
Second.
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Hockner. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous.
Make a motion, we approve February 6th, 2025.
Second.
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Hockner. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Okay. Town manager report.
With next week being school vacation week, there's not a scheduled Finance Committee or Select Board meeting. So the Finance Committee next meets the following Tuesday, which is February 25th. And the goal there is to hear from the DPW Director, Police Chief, and Fire Chief on their proposed budgets. I know there's a few things that they're going to update on as a group. And then after the budget presentations are done, the plan right now, unless something changes, is to have the same presentation that the board received on the proposed DPW building and the fire substation, to have that presented to the Finance Committee. If things go as planned, we may have a cost estimate by that point, which we'll share, and obviously we'll let the board know before it's announced publicly. And I just want to stress it, whatever that comes out, it's a preliminary one. Like, there's a long way to go yet before we nail things down. And then I would say the only substantive thing the school presentation happened last Tuesday with the Finance Committee. And so the committee is going to have the Upper Cape Tech come in and give an abbreviated presentation on March 11th. So, and then the meeting in between the two I mentioned, Dave Mason, our CWRMP coordinator, and myself are going to give an update on our wastewater efforts, longer term efforts. We're going to focus on just the highlights, but he and I met today for quite a while, and we really think later in the spring or early in the summer we should do another one of those workshops just on wastewater, so we can give you an update. Sort of leaving the meetings right now, but tied to wastewater. As the board knows, we had a special act approved at a special town meeting in November of 2022, so it was a while ago. It was at the legislature and didn't make it through the approval process by the time their session closed in the beginning of January. So our former act has been refiled as a placeholder, which is great. John Giorgio from Town Council has been working with us to see if he thinks we need to amend things at all. So we're doing some outreach, and I just left in front of your chairs the outreach we sent today to the State Treasurer's Office to try to get a meeting with them just to see if they had any suggestions or concerns that we could try to address better. I think it's fair to say that over the next year we should really take a close look. Like, do we keep looking out at the base, or do we try to go it on our own? Because the whole thing about time value of money and what might be eligible for SRF funding and what might not be. So those are the type of things we want to try to get some feedback from the Treasurer's Office on. So my guess is once that meeting takes place, I'll be able to update you better, probably in March on that. And I also left at one of the board members' requests just that summary that I had mentioned a couple weeks ago from our accounting office. It just shows you all the federal dollars that the town and school receive. And if you look at the list, we have our Jones Road Culvert project from the Natural Resources Conservation Service. That's a reimbursement grant. So we upfront the costs, we seek reimbursement. It's still in the engineering and permitting phase, which is 100% our responsibility. And I think, as the board knows, we have appropriated money twice at town meeting for that. So we're progressing along those lines. So we haven't even got to the point where we're using federal funds yet. The smaller items that you see are primarily grants that our public safety departments have received over time. And then the vast majority there's at least a dozen things where the school gets different amounts from the federal government. I know that fluctuates over time, and some of them I think are called formula grants for the most part with the Department of Education. So, we haven't heard anything about any of those funds. So just thought we'd keep you updated, and if something changes, we can let you know. So in the big picture, thankfully, we're not very dependent on federal funds in Sandwich. So
Thank you very much.
and then I think in terms of quick updates, that's it. There's a few more budget specifics to talk about later in the night.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Shane?
So the meeting with, in regards to the wastewater, when you go meet with them, do you think that when we start saying we're thinking of doing it on our own, is that going to give them a shove? Is that a detriment to
No,
them? or is
I'll be honest, I don't think they care. In a weird way, they'd probably spend more money if we do it on our own, but in the big picture, there's so many towns that they work with, I think we're a blip. But we've reached out to them many, many times to try to get help on this or input. So this is just the latest attempt. And there's a lot of things that we work on constantly with people at the base, and they're trying to identify land for greater effluent disposal, treated effluent disposal down the road. There's a lot of moving parts that we don't control, and at some point, I'm afraid we're going to get called on the carpet for not doing enough, and we're going to have to start doing something. I know one of the things, and it's going to take us a while to even do a high-level analysis, but we're going to start doing some cost projections, like with some rough time frames. What if we went it on our own? What if we did it with the base? If we don't get that special act, and anytime we cross the base boundary, we're not eligible for SRF funds or the 25% reimbursement from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, who knows? That might absorb the cost savings that we'd have by working regionally. I don't know. We're constantly talking to our neighboring towns as well, just to, keep all of our options open. I was sitting next to the Barnstable town manager today, and we were talking about wastewater, and if things fell through, is there things we could do with them or vice versa? Because, as he pointed out, we were very generous with Barnstable and Mashpee and Bourne, and we got them, utility rights in several of our roads almost, a decade ago, thinking that we'd have to work together. So.
But is there, when you look at that process for us to go to the base, what's the three biggest roadblocks? What is the thing?
I'd say it all boils down to one thing, and that's, what will the state and federal government permit for treated effluent disposal? How much and where? That's the pinch point that we've known for a long time, because you can build any plant of any size that would treat it all the way to drinking water standards. Cost you a lot of money, but you could do that. It's the disposal, and how certain federal legal decisions are going to be addressed, how it relates to Massachusetts. Heather was just looking at a map on the commission website that shows you where all of the zone 2s are, to contribute to public water about the whole Cape. And as you'd expect, as you look, it almost travels down the middle of the whole Cape. And if right now we can't dispose of even treated effluent in those areas, and you have to push it to the outsides, well, then you're getting closer to water. And so that, we're very lucky, because if we had to go it on our own, I think where we'd look for a disposal site is probably one of the, highest areas of Cape, meaning topography-wise, the highest elevations on the Cape, the furthest depth to groundwater. There's no true wetlands anywhere near where we'd dispose of it. So I think we know where we'd go if we had to do it on our own. But there's a lot of challenges with that too. So, I think we want to meet with Wright Pierce and Bill Jennings and our bond advisors and sort of do a dual path, really rough estimate, because as costs keep going up, the longer we wait. And yet, I will say, and Dave pointed this out at our meeting, and it came up at a Cape manager meeting today too. We don't have an impaired abatement in our town. We're not under the crosshairs like other towns are. We're willing and ready to do our part with Barnstable, Mashpee, and Falmouth, with their watersheds that we contribute to. Our percentages are really low in most of those areas, especially when you discount Pompanesett. The other two watersheds, we're barely above 10% of the contribution there. So, there's things we could be doing with them and paying for in their towns that will help make progress. And it seems like the longer we wait, we do get better information, there are more options, but costs go up. So that's sort of what we need to balance. But at some point, we have to pay the piper and start doing work. And I know you guys have said it for years, like, we're sort of jealous of Barnstable of seeing their roads ripped up and, seeing sewers go in, and we want to get there. We supported the nitrogen sensitive area regulations when most towns didn't. We want to get it done. But it just seems like what makes the most sense, I don't know, there's a decent chance we're not going to be able to pull it off. I don't know. I mean, no one tells us anything, and we've been asking forever, and I know I sound frustrated, but it should be a simple answer. Like, this is going to be really hard for you to do, but we're going to help you get there. Thank you. Oh, P.S., you have to treat for PFAS? Okay, we know that. Just tell us what we have to do.
Right, we've been mandated to do something.
Right. And if we can't...
They don't want to help us do it.
And I will say, if we can't get this special act done quickly, if we can't get... The amount of our system that has to go out onto the base is not much. But it's still significant money. And if we could get, low interest loans and 25% principal forgiveness, that's huge for us. And this is like, Falmouth's trying to permit a, ocean disposal. And I mean, for their effluent. I mean, there's a lot of like bellwether things that are out there that, depending on how the decisions go, will impact all the towns on the Cape. So if hypothetically that gets approved, and that came up at our meeting, geez, that opens the door for a lot of us. Then it seems like where we want to dispose of things on the base isn't that bad. I don't know. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, if you want us to fix the wastewater issue, like you've been telling us for decades, let's do it. And if you want to tell us to fix the PFAS, okay, we'll take care of that. But don't hold up one for the other.
Right.
And meanwhile, someone was joking at the meeting today, all of our shirts have PFAS in them. It's not like they've stopped making PFAS. Everything we do has PFAS in it. So get it out of the system, but then we'll keep putting it in. And I'm the least technically knowledgeable person here, so I'm just...
And currently...
I'm tired of the amount of time that myself and some key staff spend on wastewater, seemingly for big votes at town meeting and big policy decisions that we agonize about. But like, actual getting something done, like, it's going to feel great when the high school's all renovated, and this summer when we switch from a treatment plant at Oak Ridge and Forestdale to a Title V system, that's going to feel great. Got 3 things done that we thought would cost us a lot of money for way less than we ever thought. So that's good. But that's just the tip, There's a lot we have to do.
And currently the bases cannot, like, we could not currently a tie-in. I don't exaggerate when we talk to the base people, like, at least twice a month. So our 1-hour call was on Monday. So we asked them, what's your current flow? And I think their current permit at their current plant allows them, this is rough, to dispose of like 450,000 gallons a day. Today, on the busiest day, they're under 60,000 gallons a day. They're having to put things into the system to make it work that you shouldn't have to put into it. Like literally putting Pepsi-Cola syrup. They get from Pepsi-Cola and they pour it into the system because there's not enough flow and bacteria to make it work. And that's the other thing. Look at the schools. Like, we're able to disconnect them because they're not getting anywhere near the flow that we were told. That's true with every single permit that we get. So there's got to be some balance there. I don't know. And if I know we're waiting on that bankruptcy court case, that gives us a lot of opportunity depending on how that goes. And we can talk a lot more about that publicly if it happens, but until then, we really shouldn't say too much. Oh, and so that was one of our questions. Like, could the people running the base plant approach the state and say, look, we have permits, we have permission to go to 450. We're only using, if it's raining like crazy, 100,000 gallons a day because they have holes in the system. Can we take any of our municipal partners for another 300,000 gallons a day? That would almost do our whole phase 1. They don't need a new permit for that. They need permission for us to do it. So I don't know. I don't mean to bash the regulators because they mostly react to permit requests. But we need help before we do the permit requests because we don't want to waste a lot of money to submit those. But maybe the base can do that bidding for us with a small permit request, and let's just see what happens. But we have the perfect location for it,
Forestdale School literally backs right up onto the base. If we're disconnecting that system, we could use the treatment plant building to pump out to the base. I mean, there's a lot of good synergy there. But I would say if we don't have like a hard answer within a year or two, we need to just fend for ourselves and go it alone. And keep doing the things we're doing with our 3 towns to the south. But and I still, there were people around the table today where they have to sewer 100% of their town, or they have to, Falmouth was there. They have 14 embayments. We have 0 that are in trouble. We're lucky in some respects, but it's still a big dollar amount.
And the partnership with our neighbors should,
And
help us, right?
it should help us, but I know, just not to take up too much time, but that whole concept of nitrogen credit trading, where it may be cheaper in the long run for us to contribute, I'm making this up, $10 million to Mashpee to design a system and do an improvement closer to the source of the problem than improvement we'd build in our town for $20 million that would take 25 years for the water to get there. We'd get more bang for the buck, and we would contribute more to our percentage requirement by doing things like that. So we have discussions like that going on already, and there's one specific project, which not worth going into now, but Mashpee's looking at a small package treatment plant on a pond that's near Sandwich, and we have some roads around that pond, and we're wondering, like, okay, could we contribute a little bit? Like, what would that do to our percentage? Like, we have to be smart, like, bang for your buck, but if it drops our 23% to 20 and it costs us X, well, then we should think about, should we just, here's your check. But that's the type of things that we're looking at. And, we want to get, one of Dave's big priorities over the next year and a half is to get final watershed permits for all 3 embayments. We're working hard. We meet more often, I would say, with Mashpee about Pompanesett. We meet with them, I would say, once every 6 weeks, more or less. And then, Dave has separate conversations with Barnstable. Barnstable's is more straightforward because they're bigger. They have a lot of in-house talent and staff. They're doing, they're moving quicker than we are. They have all that stuff that you see going on. So we think that watershed permit might be able to be finalized quicker than Pompanesett, and then Wacoit is, that's further down the road, but our responsibility there is really, really small. And there's only a small part of town that sort of works the way there. So we have ways to get it. And I don't think it's not worth like going the political route yet. But we need to, I think this meeting, if we had it, could help. And if they tell us, and we've said that this is the first words out of our mouth at every federal and state meeting we go to. If we're barking up the wrong tree and we shouldn't even think about the base, just tell us, do it on your own. Just tell us.
Let's hope for the best. Hey, thank you. Anybody else for Bud? Okay. Correspondence, statements, announcements. Just have a few. I'll keep it brief. Capital Improvement Planning Committee met on Monday. Seemed to be positive consensus related to the material presented thus far by Heather Harper and Bill Jennings. Another meeting is scheduled. Progress. On Tuesday, the 11th, the Finance Committee met. They received a school budget presentation. Good discussion. Progress. Their next meeting, as I think Bud said, is February 25th. School committee met yesterday. The Massachusetts Building Authority is conducting a school survey assessment of our facilities. The report related to Sandwich is scheduled to be available prior to the end of 2025. The New England Association of Schools and Colleges, NAESC, team visited the Sandwich Middle High School and performed 4 days of accreditation research in October. While the NAESC accreditation status will not be formally voted on until the spring of this year, the report covers 25 areas, and Sandwich Middle High School received 22 commendations and 3 recommendations. These results certainly bode well for continued accreditation. School Safety Committee met this morning. Security hardware continues to be upgraded. School Sandwich public school staff will undertake training, comprehensive school threat assessment guidelines. That should be very interesting as well as productive. And another evacuation and reunification drill is being planned for the spring. That's all I have at the moment. So, staff meeting. Christy Senatori, Executive Director, Cape Cod Commission, the year in review. Okay, and our representative, Woody, is here as well. Thank you very much, Woody.
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this evening. I'm Christy Senatori. I'm the Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission, and I'm joined by Harold Mitchell, the Chairman of the Cape Cod Commission. As you know, and as I've done a handful of times now, I like to visit the 14 select boards and the Barnstable Town Council from time to time to provide an update on some of the work that we're doing, keep the lines of communication open, see if there's questions that you might have or opportunities for us to continue to collaborate. So I'd like to take a few moments to go through some of that work and information and have a discussion, but I do want to make sure that Mr. Mitchell has an opportunity to also provide a few remarks at the end of this presentation, certainly through the chair. So I did just want to, first of all, say thanks for the opportunity. I've been to, I think, 4 boards now, so this is my 5th, and they've been great opportunities to really have an open dialogue and discussion. So what I've handed out is our year in review. I think you're familiar with it. You've probably seen it, so I'm not going to go through that entirely. So this won't be an overly comprehensive look at the work that we've been doing, but I wanted to provide just some highlights on some of the work. And certainly if you have any questions today or even after, once you've had a chance to digest some of the information in there, you can feel free to reach out. But one of our priority areas, not surprising, is over the course of the last year and into this year has been really addressing the housing crisis that we're facing here on the Cape. And last year we were able to produce the regional housing strategy for Cape Cod. There are a number of local zoning recommendations contained within that plan, as well as regional recommendations for new funding mechanisms and programs, zoning reform and streamlining permitting, and the potential design of new entities to support affordable and attainable housing. There are also a number of resources that we developed at the Commission to support the housing strategy itself and to support implementation of the plan, and these are looking at multifamily design guidelines, a series of model bylaws that could be implemented locally, and we also developed housing profiles for all 15 communities, as well as Barnstable County. And we're going to continue to update that data and information so that there is a resource for our communities to be able to understand the current landscape in terms of housing. We are currently moving forward with implementation of a couple of the specific projects and recommendations within that plan itself. The first is the pre-approved plans project, and I know some of your staff have been very engaged in this process. But we will soon have a series of model housing plans for a range of housing types, and these include small-scale housing types like accessory dwelling units, duplexes, triplexes, as well as some other small multifamily housing. We look forward to and anticipate working with some communities that might be interested in implementing this locally, so certainly there will be potential opportunities in discrete locations to look at pre-approved plans. I think we are looking forward to working with the town of Sandwich through our 2025 DLTA program to develop zoning for the South Sandwich Village area and the historic town center. And this is an area where we could potentially look to utilize pre-approved plans. So we look forward to connecting with your staff on that. The second implementation piece of our housing strategy that we're moving forward with is research around a community housing trust and a housing bank. And these would directly support implementation of the recommendation we heard from many of our local communities that they're needing new entities that can more swiftly acquire and develop or redevelop property for affordable and attainable housing. So we will continue to work with stakeholders to develop a framework to potentially advance the creation of these entities across the region. So shifting gears from housing, but we've been working obviously in the space of water quality for quite some time. I know you've already had a robust discussion around wastewater, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail there, but our focus really over the course of the past couple of years has really been looking at our freshwater quality and looking at the 890 ponds and lakes that we have in the region. We have just completed a draft of the regional housing strategy. That's going to be going out for public comment within the next day or two. And so we're looking forward to hearing feedback from the community and any potential edits or amendments that we should be making to that. We also developed a number of resources to support the freshwater strategy, really looking at the protection and restoration of our freshwater bodies. We developed pond buffer guidance as well as a water quality data portal. So the water quality data portal is actually an expansion of the coastal water quality data portal that we developed to really look at our marine estuaries and embayments. So now we have the same portal for the information that we're collecting around freshwater. So it's including data that's being collected by our local pond groups as well as many of our regional partners. And looking at the regional pond monitoring program was critical not only during the development of the freshwater strategy, but also as we go forward so that we can measure progress. And so we are very pleased that the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund Management Board recently voted to provide funds for freshwater monitoring in addition to some of the funding that they've been providing for coastal water quality monitoring. So I won't touch on wastewater too much, but it was mentioned already, the Water Protection Fund Management Board, and the certainty that that does provide in identifying subsidies for Cape projects to move forward. And just last year alone, the board awarded nearly $65 million in subsidies for wastewater and water quality projects in 8 towns across the region. So, you know, your town manager has been instrumental and really provided an extreme amount of leadership to that management board. And so I can't thank Bud enough for really the support and making sure that those sandwiches, you know, really in the early stages, maybe that's debatable, but certainly is tackling the wastewater challenges head on. It's been great to really have Bud serving in that capacity. So kind of shifting gears to something a little bit different, and that's working in the broadband and digital equity space. We were very pleased to work with the town of Sandwich to create a municipal digital equity plan, which really assesses the digital divide in Sandwich and identifies opportunities to advance digital equity, looking at affordability of service, and assessing technology that might be necessary for participation in different opportunities such as civic, social, and economic life. And the development of skills that are meaningful for digital engagement. The goal of the plan is to prepare the town for funding opportunities and to guide some decision-making and investment opportunities. And I just wanted to note that Sandwich is actually the first town on the Cape to receive implementation funding. So I think there was about $65,000 received for the purchase of laptops and Chromebooks to implement digital literacy classes at the Center for Active Living and as public library, as well as some desktop computers at the library to assist the public. So congratulations to you on that. We've done a fair amount of work in the area of transportation as well, and certainly following the Cape Cod Canal Bridges program, we certainly recognize that there's been a total of about $2.4 billion in funding that's been secured. About 1.7 of that is federal funds, about $700 million from the state. We're also working with Mass DOT. They've made some recommendations around the approaches to the new bridges, as well as the interchanges that will connect some of the adjacent communities to that infrastructure. All this information is posted on their website, but we look forward to continuing to collaborate and advocate for the replacement of these bridges. Should all move forward, the construction of phase 1, which would be the replacement of the Sagamore Bridge, would begin in 2028. One of our major initiatives around transportation is looking at our Vision Zero action plan, which is really an initiative that's designed to improve roadway safety and address traffic fatalities. And this is something that's a nationwide project, and we're pleased to bring it here regionally. And completing this action plan will actually make all 15 towns eligible for Safe Streets for All implementation grants, so kind of leveraging federal funding to implement some of the strategies here locally. We do have an advisory committee that is overseeing the development of that plan, and they're providing some feedback throughout the process. And Sean Pillay, who's the chair of the Sandwich Bicycle Committee, also the representative on the JTC, has really been a valuable member of that committee, so certainly want to make sure to thank him. Kind of shifting, there's a lot more in transportation, but we could probably be here for several hours talking about some of that work. So shifting a little bit towards coastal resiliency and some of the climate work that we've been doing. Recently, we completed a development of a model bylaw and regulations to promote resiliency in the floodplain, and that's looking today, but certainly looking at future impacts. We look forward and continuing to collaborate with the towns on the potential implementation of these model bylaws. We're also interested in assisting communities who are looking to pursue implementation funds or funding of designs for additional roadways with the low-lying roads project. So as you may recall, we have worked with all 15 communities across the region to identify roadway segments and come up with designs that would be appropriate. And so now we look forward to working with towns on the next step of those projects. Last year, we also completed a new comprehensive economic development strategy, our new CEDS. So this is a plan that we update every 5 years. This was approved by both the Barnstable County Economic Development Council, the Cape Cod Commission, as well as the Federal Economic Development Administration. And so we have an economic development district designation that's through the federal EDA. And with this new comprehensive economic development strategy, it does now make us eligible for additional funding opportunities through the federal EDA. So we will monitor what opportunities might be coming available over the course of the next several months and beyond, but making sure that our work at the commission and working with the communities is focused on some of the priority actions that are included in the economic development strategy. So these include efforts to incentivize year-round housing, simplifying appropriate housing development in the right locations, advocating for the replacement of the canal bridges, and a variety of other recommendations. And then finally, we are underway with an update to the regional policy plan. So this is a plan that we update every 5 years. And so some of the areas of focus, as you probably recall, we did a major overhaul to this plan during the last update to the plan. So right now we're looking at areas of focus where we're looking to encourage housing in the right places, promoting reuse and redevelopment consistent with the regional housing strategy, preserving our natural areas, economic resiliency, and then, of course, climate action and infrastructure. We had a resident survey out in the field that's just closed, but that will help us to gauge attitudes locally, preferences and concerns about our natural built and community systems, and help inform that regional policy plan update. We're also convening stakeholders in a series of focus groups currently to really get a better idea of what changes might need to be made to some of the goals and objectives within that plan itself. So we are working with a subcommittee of the Cape Cod Commission and look forward to hopefully having a draft of that plan update by early summer. And I just wanted to just make a note that congratulations on the local comprehensive plan that was approved and finalized, and that was a great success for the town, so we're really pleased to see that move forward. I know many of you were at our One Cape Summit last year. It was a good opportunity to bring together over 400 leaders and stakeholders across the region over the course of a couple of days, really addressing a lot of our major challenges and taking action. And we look forward to that event again this year. We'll be beginning the planning phase for that soon, and we'll be back in touch with more information as soon as we have dates and locations determined. So with that, I wanted to just take a minute and thank Chairman Mitchell for his service on the commission. I can't even begin to count the number of hours that Woody actually dedicates to not only reviewing materials and talking to staff and making sure that we have all the information that we need so that the board can make the decisions that they do, but really his leadership and really working to make sure that the members are up to speed on the decisions that they need to make. So I wanted to just thank Woody, certainly. Thank you for continuing to appoint him, and thank him for serving as our chairman, and just make sure that he has a chance to make a few remarks.
Thank you. One thing I want to say to you is I send out the newsletters for you, and that what we've just talked about, what Chrissy just laid out for you, is just a foundation of what's coming up. And we're excited about a lot of changes, and we're excited about a lot of things we're putting out, the initiatives and our regional policy plan. But one thing I always try to make sure you get is the newsletter, but also the invitation to comment. And so I really would love to see, that. If you have comments, come back to me. I'll get it to the staff, but you know as well as I do, you pick up the phone and call the staff, they're going to respond to you immediately. So we appreciate that, but thank you for your continued support.
Thank you. And thank you for the compliment to Sandwich. And thank you for all of your support and genuine effort in all these important areas for Sandwich and for Barnstable County as a whole. Anybody else, Shane?
Just two things, and this is kind of a request from me to you to be part of, partner with us and be our champions for these things, because ironically they're on the same page in the annual review. Is there are two things that go, I think, hand in hand that really concern me probably in the next 5 to 10 years is the bridge replacement and technology. And how they go hand in hand is that Sandwich is one of the really two communities that's going to be disproportionately affected by the bridge replacement project from a traffic standpoint to a level that I don't think any one of us will really fully comprehend until it actually happens. We're talking about installing in the latest plans that I saw, a major shift of traffic right at the bridge, with a redoing of, installing a elevated rotary, so to speak, that's going to disrupt local, roadways for years. And with that increase in traffic and the slowdown of traffic, it inherently, we already see during the summer, and I've been working with some of the representatives from Verizon and some of the other cell phone receptions, but what happens, their carriers, is that when that traffic backs up and everybody is sitting on Route 6, we lose all of our cell phone reception in Sandwich, and we're 100% disproportionately affected during the summer. It comes to a grinding halt. At my house down in East Sandwich by Sandy Neck, there is zero reception. It's not like it goes from like some to spotty coverage. It goes to zero because in talking with the technicians at Verizon, they're aware of the problem. So they, it's almost like Cape Cod has taken a back seat because they view us as a summer community. So when they do their averages for carrier consumption for the year, they're running at 80% or 70% of network capacity. But from, after, and these, some of those things are really historical numbers prior to COVID. Post-COVID, it's like if they open a tower in Sandwich now, the minute that tower goes on, it's at 105% of capacity. And that's what that was shared with me. So, as we look forward to these bridges and the traffic, nightmare that's really going to come, it's, and eventually when it's completed, hopefully it'll work, it'll be great. But I'm really concerned for our citizens during that construction time frame and then the technology, we're already lacking in the infrastructure as it is now. And then to put that additional burden on us locally here, I think is going to be, I don't know if they've really looked at that or taken that into consideration, but, I'm asking you guys to be our champions for that because I think that we are going to be disproportionately affected as a community.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. And I think you are in a very unique position compared to the other communities on the Cape. And I do think that there's more attention needs to be paid. And so we would be happy to work with you on this. We'd be happy to make sure that some of these issues get elevated to the, appropriate officials, appropriate levels, and see what we can do to make sure that these issues don't become more extensive.
Right. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, sure, please.
Just, I was able to go to, one of the topics Christy mentioned was the pre-approved housing plans, like one of the kickoff meetings. I mean, I thought it was like really interesting and exciting, try and develop different housing styles that would be attractive, that once the plans were finalized, like each town building department could sign off on the appropriate design. So if a developer came in, we could even steer them towards that. But more importantly for us is I think we have some town property that would really, tie in well with that, especially once we figure out where we're doing certain things, like what we can use some of our other lands for. And I know Leanne Drake especially probably knows the most about our housing, and she goes to a lot of these follow-up meetings, and so that's something I just think, like once it gets a little bit further down the road, we should bring you up to speed. I think it could really help us a lot. And just the other thing I mentioned, Christy and I have known each other forever, and so she knows I would say, like, just give it to us bad if we have to. Are we doing the right thing on wastewater, or should we just give up and just do it locally?
Goodness.
I don't know.
I mean, you're doing the right things. You're doing the things that you should be doing. You're exploring the opportunities and the avenues, and I sense your frustration. And these are big projects, and they're big dollar amounts, and you're not alone in that the Cape needs to be looking at these issues. And we want to provide support through not only the Water Protection Fund, but through the resources that we have at the Commission to make sure that you are in a position that you can put forward a plan that makes the most sense for your community, whether that's going it alone or making one of those other opportunities work. So I think that you're doing all the right things, exploring all the opportunities, and we want to provide that level of support to you all.
I don't know, personally, it'd be great because it seems like effluent disposal is the big issue more than treatment. Not in terms of dollars, but in terms of that's what our permits are getting hung up on. So once a few of those break, or if there's a way to identify regional disposal locations on the Cape, I think that's something all the towns could benefit from, but it's hard.
Yeah, and we've always considered, one of the major tenets of the 208 plan was really working cross-town boundary, and so you're doing that, and you're trying to do that, and so the disposal issue is tricky, and so hopefully sooner rather than later you'll be able to solve it.
Anybody else? Okay. Gosh, that was a great presentation. We appreciate your support, as I said earlier. Nice to see you both. Thanks for coming out anytime.
Thank you.
Okay, public hearing. In accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 138, the Sandwich Select Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, June 13th at around 7:15 p.m. in the Sandwich Historic Town Hall Auditorium, located at 130 Main Street, Sandwich, Massachusetts, to consider the application for a change of class of seasonal on-premises all alcohol liquor license to an annual on-premises all alcohol liquor license for Heritage Theaters, located at 280G, Route 130, Sandwich, Massachusetts, 02563. Christina Sakalos Hedden as manager. Anyone wishing to be heard on the subject will be afforded an opportunity at that time. Motion to open the public hearing?
Make a motion to open the public hearing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Mr. Sakalos? Well, what would you like to do? Yes, ma'am.
Christina Hedin. I am the general manager, corporate secretary, and current liquor license manager for the theater. And like I said, we are just trying to change the class from seasonal to annual. We were among the businesses named in the application to the state for authority to grant the 4 additional licenses. This was signed into law on January 3rd, and we're not seeking to make any additional changes to our license premises or hours during which alcohol may be served.
That's it. Does anybody, do you gentlemen have any questions? Does anybody in the public have any questions for the applicant?
All set?
Okay. Yes, seeing none, motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second?
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Hockter. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay. Mr. George, do you have a motion?
Okay. Make a motion, we change of on-premise all alcohol liquor license from seasonal to annual. Heritage Steers Incorporated, 280G, Route 130. Christina Takalasos, Hayden, manager.
Second?
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Hockter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Best wishes for continued
Thank you.
success.
Thanks for making time for us tonight, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, our second public hearing for the evening, in accordance with Town Charter, Section 7.3B, the Sandwich Select Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, February 13th, 2025, at 7:30 p.m. in Sandwich Historic Town Hall Auditorium, 130 Main Street, Sandwich, Massachusetts, on the proposed fiscal year 26 budget for town meeting. Anyone wishing to be heard on the subject will be afforded an opportunity at that time. Motion to open the public hearing.
Make a motion, we open the public hearing.
Second?
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Hockter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Is anyone here to address this situation?
The response was overwhelming.
Okay. In that, no one's here to address the issue or question the issue, let's close the public hearing.
Okay. Make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second?
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Hockter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now I'll solicit, if I may, Mr. Dunham, if he's got any comments on the issue.
Sure. I just start out by saying that the hearing that was just publicized and opened and then closed is required under the town charter that the board conducts 2 public hearings. The second one would occur typically after the warrant has been posted in mid-April, but before the actual town meeting has been held. But I would just stress to everyone at home that if they're interested in finding out more about the budget, it will literally be spoken about at every select board meeting between now and town meeting, and the same with the Finance Committee. And then earlier this week, all of the budget information and backup material that the Select Board and Finance Committee receives, which is quite voluminous, has all been posted on the town website. And if you go to the homepage, which is sandwichmass.org, at the bottom there's a link to the budget recommendation and presentations, all the backup material, and then right next to FY26, which is the next fiscal year, which starts on July 1st, you can literally access the same information for at least the last 5 or 6 years with a simple click of your mouse. And so that a lot of information's there if people are interested. Just to back up our presentation from, I think, 2 or 3 meetings ago, and what the school department made to the Finance Committee on Tuesday night, I think the easiest way to characterize, I say both budgets, meaning the school departments and the general government, it's mostly a level service budget. With any cost centers where costs have increased, we've tried to budget appropriately to cover those changes. Very little in the way of new personnel other than maybe trying to add some funds to combine with other funds to hopefully fund a part-time position later on in the year, or to combine it with another position. So there's a lot of that work that goes on regularly. And I think, especially for the town side, there's been a couple of cost centers that have gone up more than most, but people probably recognize it in their own lives, whether it's the cost of vehicles has gone up significantly, what people are seeing for some utility expenses, although we did quite a decent increase last year and we got an attractive rate working with the county bid. So neither the school or us have had a problem with that this year. And I think we've tried to focus as much as we could on capital. And really, I think the big takeaway, if you take a step back and look at the overall town budget, is how much money we're having to spend for the upcoming year on what looks like to be employee-related costs, i.e. health insurance, some retirement expenses, but mostly health insurance. And I think, that's indicative of what the whole country is experiencing in our region, not just a public sector job or a private sector job. It's happening everywhere. And so that was the one thing when we did our budget presentation a few weeks ago that we had some uncertainty about, and we did get clarity on what our rate increases would be on Monday. So I was pleased that we held off giving out the budget binders for a week, because with that clarity, things actually went in our favor. Not that we brag about an increase that's just a shade under 10%, because that's a lot. But we were fearful that it would be much bigger than that. And in terms of the range between the towns that were being charged the least and the towns that were being charged the most, we're right at the very bottom. So we were lucky in that respect. So I thought I would touch on just what those changes were based on the two presentations, and it's really only 3 pages, so it looks like this in the packet with the changes highlighted in red. So when I did the budget presentation, we thought we would have closer to a 15% increase in our medical insurance costs as opposed to what we ended up getting, which was about a 9.8% increase. So if you do the math, roughly 71% of our 2.5% increase that's allowed under law for FY26, exclusive of new growth, is being taken up by those health and retirement costs. So we're not unique, but that's a huge percentage, and I think Bill Jennings says it's best. Like, that's something that we can, ride a bad wave for a year or two, but if that's a long-term trend that goes for a decade, there's no city or town in the state that's going to be able to maintain, increases that large without having to impact services. So that'll just be something, over the next couple of years. It'll be interesting to see how that develops. I will stress, we had really bad years, higher than what we just heard, 10, 15 years ago for 2 or 3 years in a row, and thankfully they mitigated after that. So, let's hope we're in that type of a cycle and not one where it just continues. But not to keep saying it's not our problem, but it's a problem we all have to deal with, but it's like an issue that everyone is having, to address. And when you hear the reasons why costs are going up, you can actually see it in our own lives and how we see whether certain medications are being used or, using, rapid care facilities as opposed to emergency rooms, which is a good thing. But compared to your primary care, it's a bad thing because it's more expensive. So urgent care, things like that, it's happening everywhere. So just to cut to the more meaty stuff and not to drag this out, but if you look at the first page, which we were calling our base recommended budget, that's with the town general government operating budget at 3.65%. The school operating budget very similar at 3.36%. What we had heard about Upper Cape Tech and what we think so far are safe assumptions on our revenues and expenses. We have a balanced budget at our base budget, and the key thing I want to point out is on the revenue side. When we made this presentation 3 weeks ago, we thought our insurance would be higher, so we were able to increase the excess levy reserve from 3.25 to 3.5 million, which is higher than what we had assumed for this year. And again, that's a safe assumption. Usually when we get that actual number certified about 10 months from now, it's much higher than that. But again, just to be safe, we talk about some of these things a lot, and I think most towns don't even discuss these issues. But the easiest way I could explain excess levy reserve is it's the difference between, under law, what we could be taxing residents versus what we're actually taxing. So if you have a reserve, it means people aren't being charged for a significant amount of money that they could be being taxed for. In our case, over $3 million. So I know we spent quite a bit of our budget presentation talking about the only difference between that base budget and our recommended optimal outcome budget was to trying to get some additional funds for DPW public infrastructure repairs, i.e. roads, drainage, roadside issues. Without going into, again, too much detail, we've had some extensive studies done for decades, the most recent of which said that ideally the town should be spending roughly $2.6 million a year between state monies and our own money on public infrastructure to try to keep our roads and drainage at a certain level, bring things up, but then to keep it at an acceptable level for a long time. So that $2.6 million magic number has been a goal for a really long time, and we haven't been able to get there. So we think with some new money coming in from the state the last few years, and our budgets being fairly positive in the sense we've been able to fund a few important things, we think we can get to that $2.6 million if the general government budget went up by another $560,000, which is all for one line item, and that's our DPW public infrastructure. If we did that on this next page with a few yellow highlights, I think you'll see that we would be able to implement some some pretty significant things that over several years the public would really notice and still keep an excess levy reserve of over $3 million. That's a positive change from our presentation we made 2 weeks ago. And I would say, paraphrasing, it's probably the biggest policy decision the select board will need to make as we head towards town meeting. We talked a little bit about that with the Finance Committee. I know when Paul Tilton's in 2 weeks with Finance, he'll go through that in more detail. But those are really the two changes we were able to make once we found out what our health rates were. And thankfully, again, they didn't go up as much as we thought, so it makes that goal, I believe, like easier to achieve and still keep a really safe number in reserve for what might happen down the road. And I think, you'd see a good bang for the buck with that money because I think Patrick always says it's our most visible, most expensive asset. If you added up the value of all of our public roads, it dwarfs the schools, the town hall, the police and fire stations. I mean, it's many zeros bigger than all of that. And we need to keep those in good shape. And I will put a quick plug in, like the drainage issues. I don't think people understand how expensive those type of repairs are. We've knocked off some really big ones with the road bond and a few other efforts, but there's a lot more to go.
We have snow and ice deficit now. Should we carry that over? Recap?
Yeah, we could. Right now, we're not in deficit. We're in good shape. So I don't even think we're going to need that money. We usually put that money there in case we need more.
Yeah.
And traditionally, if you look the last several years, about the only thing we've gone to the Finance Committee for, which is substantive, is fire department overtime. Everything else we've lived within our means. So I
We
feel
just carry it, and then when you get to the end of the
we
year,
could. Yep.
end of the budget session, you can.
The last couple of
It's a
years.
good way to do it, because
Yeah. Last couple of years have been so good. Working proactively, we've had enough money to buy a new plow.
knock on wood
Buy,
somewhere around.
yeah. So we've knocked off some of those capital
Knock
things,
on
which is great.
photographic wood, yeah,
Yep.
exactly. That's good.
And I have to say, I thought the school did a really good job on Tuesday night with their budget presentation. It's very straightforward. I'm not able to answer any detailed questions about their budget, but it was a good presentation. And I think the most positive thing was just the results that they're seeing when you look across almost all the grades, test scores and other things compared to other Cape towns and the statewide average. We're doing really well, which is great. And there definitely has been a slight mitigation in the number of students going to public charter schools. So those assessments have gotten way more manageable than those years when they were going up by, I'm not joking, like a couple 100%. Many years, for 15 years, it was really hard.
Anybody else? Yeah,
Still pretty amazing to have excess levy capacity.
Did a chart, which if you guys are interested in, because Heather, Bill, and I were having like a, not a heated, but an excited conversation with each other about all this stuff and like, okay, why, Mashpee has like 17 million in free cash. We have 4.2 or something. They're smaller than us, and they have an excess levy reserve, not as big as ours. So it's sort of weird that I found some information on the state website, and I did all 15 towns. We have, as a percentage of your total operating budget, we have far and away the least amount of free cash, but we have the highest percentage of excess levy reserve. And I think it's all because, and I'm just being blunt, we cut it so close for so long. When the power plant new growth came through on Unit 3, we were so nervous to spend it on recurring costs. We basically, did a couple one-hit wonders that weren't recurring costs. We kept that money, and as we found out, geez, we're doing okay with it, well, then we were able to fund the library and the CAL through that. And yet, I thought our reserve would drop, to 2 million by now. It's still back up where it was when we agreed to do that. So I almost feel like we've been so cautious in a good way, and the economy has generally been positive, that we've been able to sort of hold out and not have to use that. How that compares to other towns is a little bit unique, but even a town like Barnstable, who has huge free cash, they spend right up to their limit, so they really have little or no excess levy reserve. But they have all sorts of other reserves that if something happened that we don't have, that they could spend.
We have so much value right now in the shoreline of unoccupied homes that don't call for any other services. That's what the other Cape towns have that Sandwich really never had.
Yeah.
We're only 7% of our properties are seasonal.
Yeah.
40%, I think, in Brewster it was somewhere.
Yeah. I would say the three simplest things that make up free cash, it's, you were budgeted this amount, you spent this, so that delta is sort of what we had left at the end of the year that we get certified and carry over. That's one part of it. The other is our local receipts, which if you really look at them, and it's all in the binder, if people want all the dirty details, 70+% of our local receipts are your motor vehicle excise bills. We don't control that. We have no judgment on that, but that makes up the bulk of that money, and you got to make sure you don't overestimate your local receipts. So we usually bring in a little more, so that helps us. And then so it's what you had left. Your local receipts, and then I would say, and I'm trying to think of the best way to say it to not offend other towns. It's like, if you want to bump your excess, your free cash, put an extra $2 million on your health insurance line item because you're not going to spend it. Well, that's $2 million you have for your free cash next year. We've never ever done that, but our free cash isn't big enough, so it could. And we've always run things so tight. Some of our money has had to go for operating expenses. So it's just the way Sandwich has always done things. We always try to improve things, to look at different ways to do it, but there's certain things where decisions were made decades ago you can't reverse at this point.
The other thing that was interesting in talking with Bill was that, the overall values of the towns, like where he said everything in Sandwich is about $7 billion. Mm-hmm. And then if you compare it to Chatham, I think the number was 20 or 22 billion. So and they're a much smaller town, but the value is 22 billion. So it's 3 times what we are just by the value of what's there. So.
I say this out of jealousy, not like casting stones, but the best example I can think of where Chatham did things so wisely years ago, they addressed their wastewater really early on when there was some federal money to help out. They then adopted the Cape Cod Land Bank, the 3% surcharge, and all the rest of the Cape towns converted that 3% to the CPA. They voted to do the CPA 3% on top of their Cape Cod Land Bank 3%. After several years, they realized they weren't needing the Cape Cod Land Bank money because they really didn't have a lot of open space to buy. They already had it, and there's a lot of private property there. So they took a vote and converted that 3% to an OPEB trust fund account. and got a special act through the legislature. So they've been collecting 3% a year to go towards their OPEB liability. You know, we might have, like, it's on the cover sheet, what is it, like $3+ million in OPEB money for a liability that's like $128 million. I bet you if you looked at Chatham now, they probably have $50 million of a liability of $80 million, because their liability would be less because they're a smaller town than us. They have fewer employees. They virtually have no school department. They have a regional school department, you know, so that's not their issue. It's the regional schools issue. So and that's the other thing you forget, except for the Upper Cape towns and Barnstable, no one else has a local school department. I mean, that's the vast majority of our expenses, education, not just Sandwich, but the charter schools, Upper Cape Tech. That's a huge difference for the 5 towns that are near the bridge.
Indeed.
But all in all, we're in really good shape. We're probably in our best financial shape we've ever been in. There's those issues of concern that we talk about every year, but I think we talk them through and try to make the best decisions that we can and address them when we're able to. So.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Bud. Old business. May 5th, 2025, annual town meeting, draft list of potential articles.
So I just thought I'd show you, I put a revised one in front of your chairs where there was one article that Taylor White, the town clerk, reminded me of that I added. I won't go through each of these, but you know, the first really 12 articles are all ones we do every year, whether they're the annual budget appropriations, some of the transfers that we do for our budget, and then also our Community Preservation Act, our administrative costs. And this year there is one recommended project on the town hall restoration, which we talked about a few weeks ago. So I'll focus on the ones after it. Like John Giorgio is working with us, and that's one of the key things we want to hear from the state treasurer's office. And I keep saying the state treasurer's office because they're the ones that oversee the state revolving fund. So they're really the experts on if there are concerns about what we're trying to pass in our special act, then it would be good to know that. So if we have to revote it, I just thought for our draft list, we should keep that on there. If you remember, a gentleman came in, I think, twice to board meetings in the fall. The state did adopt a so-called HERO Act last year, and they don't go into effect until July 1st. But what it is 2 different types of exemptions for certain types of disabled veterans, and I don't know the act as well as our Director of Assessing, Ben Steich, does, but one is for disabled veterans exemption limits, and the other is on motor vehicle excise exemption limits. And so the Board of Assessors is taking a look at this and will make a recommendation to the board. And if we do that, they require a local adopt acceptance at town meeting. So that's something we're looking at to get ready. And then there's 2 zoning amendments, one on the accessory dwelling units, and I think Christy Senatori mentioned that, and I know we've heard with the governor's office that's a huge priority, and the state law change. So this is to try to bring us into compliance with state law and to update our zoning. The planning board has been doing a lot of work on this, and also on the so-called non-conforming lots merger doctrine, the part of our bylaw that talks about if contiguous lots and if they conform, if they're under the same ownership. There's some issues that have come up over time that they're looking at. And so as it gets closer, I know Leanne would love to come in and explain these in more detail, which I think would help for all of our benefit. And then we've talked about the last couple meetings, the short-term rental bylaw. I did get the latest draft, so that's in the back of your packet. No need to go over it. We're double checking if we do need to hold a public hearing on that, but even if we don't, maybe we should, just to, solicit input from the public. There's no requirement for general bylaw changes, but we're doing some double checking to see if when the state approved those new regulations, they may have required it as part of the regulations, not as part of normal town bylaw changes. So looking at that. And then this is the one that came from Taylor, number 19 on the list. There's a provision of state law that if you adopt it, if someone's coming in to get nomination papers to run for elected office, theoretically right now, someone could come in like an hour before the deadline. The clerk's office would have to do a bunch of stuff. Then the person would have to get the required number of signatures. Then it would have to come back in by the deadline. This just changes it doesn't change the deadline of when you get stuff back. It just sets a limit of 48 hours before that deadline. If you're going to run, you have to come and get your papers by then, because there is some paperwork that the office has to fill out. And so this is something that I believe a lot of town clerks' offices are bringing before voters. So again, I can get more details from Taylor on that as we get closer to town meeting. And then I believe we've heard at least one petition is probably going to be submitted based on inquiries his office has received, but I don't believe anything's been returned yet. So, I mean, in terms of number of articles, not too bad.
And I think a public interaction on that draft would not be a bad.
No, I agree. Yep.
Distribute information and field the questions as well. Anybody else? Okay. Other matters not reasonably anticipated by the chairman under old business, I have none. New business. Other matters not reasonably anticipated by the chairman, I have none. Anybody else? Okay. Public comment? Okay. Closing remarks. I have a couple, if you don't mind. I'd like to wish everyone a pleasant President's Day on Monday and enjoy the long weekend. Meanwhile, please maintain those under attack in Eastern Europe, the conflict in the Middle East, and the overall threats to world peace, as well as those that continue to be affected by natural emergencies, in our thoughts and prayers. Anybody else? Motion to close?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Mr. George, second by Mr. Hockner. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Our next meeting is on Thursday, February 27th at 7 p.m. here in Historic Town Hall. Thank you for listening. Stay safe.